The Cartoonerific podcast is sponsored by the Wonderful World of Animation Gallery, home of rare and wonderful fine animation art. Visit their website at wwagallery.com. And for our Cartoonerific listeners, you will receive a special 10% discount off any purchase if you purchase by March 25th, 2024. Just go to wwagallery.com and enter code CARTOON10 for your 10% discount. Once again, this discount is only valid until midnight, March 25th, 2024. Once again, visit wwagallery.com.
The following is a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
Welcome to Cartoon Fun, it's Cartoonerific, yeah! It's Cartoonerific, Cartoonerific, it's Cartoonerific, with your host Brian Mitchell.
Well, hello now. This is the Cartoonerific podcast, classic animated cartoons. I am Brian Mitchell, your host. This show today, this very show that you're listening to, we're going to be talking about collecting animation artwork. And I think this is a very important show. I think there's a lot of people out there that are interested in animation art. I think there are a lot of people that are trying to understand what all the different types of animation art that there are out there. And we hope to clarify some of that on this show. So, you know, there's, there's original production cells, there's animation drawings, there's animation roughs, there's storyboards, background paintings. There's a lot of this conceptual art. There's a lot of different parts to the animation process, and it's all collectible. And there are people out there that just collect one thing, or they collect a whole bunch of different things. I know there's one collector out there, all he does is collect Alice in Wonderland cells. And then you have other people that just collect Sleeping Beauty or Mickey Mouse. Some people collect something from every single movie that was ever made by the Walt Disney Studio, and they try to get the best piece, and until a better piece comes along, that stays in their collection. They keep rotating and selling off stuff and bring better things into their collection. So everybody has a different way of doing things, and it's an interesting hobby. It can be quite expensive. Of course, there are ways of acquiring things for less money, but it requires a lot more digging, and that's tough, but it's also very rewarding. It's like looking for buried treasure. So that's what today's show is all about. It's collecting animation art. Our special guest today is Miss Debbie Weiss. She is the owner and operator of the Wonderful World of Animation Gallery in California. We're going to be talking about animation art collecting, what's hot, what's not. I hope you stay tuned for that. It's going to be a good show. We'll be right back, right after this. Don't go away.
Cartoonerific is the place to be to celebrate hand-drawn animated cartoons. The Cartoonerific podcast features interviews with the magic makers behind your favorite animated cartoons, with episodes uploaded every Friday. Or visit the Cartoonerific blog featuring articles about classic cartoon animation. At the Cartoonerific Gallery, view original animation art and memorabilia from your favorite animated films and TV shows. The company store features exclusive swag from the Cartoonerific universe. And coming soon, brand new world premiere cartoons on the Cartoonerific channel. It's all here. Join the fun at www.cartoonerific.com. That's cartoon, ERIFIC.com. It's Cartoonerific, saving the universe one funny cartoon at a time. And now it's time for our special Cartoonerific guest.
Hi, welcome back. This is Brian again. We have a special guest today. We're talking about collecting animation art. And if you haven't been around for a while or you're taking notice, animation art has been here. People have been collecting it pretty strongly since the 70s and even before that. Our special guest today she has a gallery in California, in Culver City, California, called The Wonderful World of Animation. She has a website, and you can go to it and you can take a look at all the wonderful treasures there. Here is Debbie Weiss. Hi, Debbie. How you doing today?
Hello, terrific. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for joining us. So tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you get into this wonderful world of animation art?
It kind of was an interesting roadmap for me. Back when I was around 10, someone at school brought a Richie Rich comic book. I'd never seen comic books before, and it was like my world turned upside down. My heart stopped. I was so excited. And that led to collecting Archie comics. And after college, I worked in London. I was a trader in financing and Wall Street background. I was in London, then Tokyo. When I lived in Tokyo, my mother bought me an Archie cell, feeding off my love of Archie comics. I'd never heard of a cell before, known it existed. I thought it used to be little film strips. And I was like, oh my God, it's these big, amazing pieces of art. And I own one of a kind piece that no one else owns. And I'm looking at my TV screen and I'm looking at my wall. And I was like, oh, I would just get so excited. I used to dream about finding animation in people's basements, all these things. And I started collecting. I loved it. I would wake up excited to see what I could find. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to leave my career and I'm going to start a gallery because I love this so much.
Wow, that's really interesting. So the first cell was Archie. How'd you branch out into some of the other animation art?
What I started doing was, so I had the Archie with that comic book connection. And I started thinking, what are all the characters or scenes or things? And I made a wish list of about 30 or 50 pieces. I started calling galleries and I couldn't match any of the wish lists because I just didn't realize when you start collecting, it's very easy to think, oh, there's a whole movie and there was all these thousands of cells. Surely I can find this scene, Dopey with Snow White, Dopey with the diamond eyes, all these specific scenes. And what I came to realize is that a lot of this art simply didn't survive for a variety of reasons. The value way back when was in the actual film, not the art. I like to think of it when you're in college and you write the paper that you turn in to your professor, you don't keep all your notes and your drafts and your outlines, you throw them away. That's what a lot of the studios did, or during the war, they reused things. So it's actually very difficult to pick a specific scene or specific moment and go, you want that. What I try and recommend people do, and what I've learned to do, is just pick a piece that speaks to you for whatever reason. And so, for example, in my collection, I have really evil, I have amazing Maleficent cells and Queen drawings from Snow White. And then I have a collection, believe it or not, of naked Simpson cells, because I think that's hilarious. And I also have super cute moments like Thumper with his girlfriend, things like that. So like evil, cute, and naked Simpsons. And I would hate to think what an analyst would think that says about me.
To each his own, I guess. Where'd you set up that gallery? Was that the original gallery in California that you set up? Or
back at the time I was working in New York. So I started working out of my apartment in Connecticut. I lived very near New York, and I was training Brazil at the time, where I had to basically wake up at 4:30. So I would wake up 4:30, go into Manhattan, come home at about 8 at night, work on the gallery till 1:30 in the morning. And at some point I had to make a choice. It was too much.
Right.
It wasn't very sustainable, 3 hours of sleep a night.
Well, I'm glad you went all in with the Wonderful World of Animation Gallery. Been on there. I bought a few things from you over the years.
Thank you.
I think, you have a pretty cool selection of stuff. Sometimes I'll go on there and I'll see stuff that never thought existed. A lot of the old Hanna-Barbera material, the original Hanna-Barbera material, I thought was just either lost to the world or bulldozed, or maybe just they threw it out or whatever. And you have a lot of neat Walt Disney animation art. When you started collecting, where did you start looking for the animation art? Because
at that time, this is before the internet, believe it or not. So back then I would try and find a phone book. I was in Manhattan at the time looking in the phone book. There were a couple of collectors magazines that don't exist anymore. And there were a lot of advertisements in there. So I basically called everybody. I feel at the time there was maybe 30 or 50 galleries.
Yeah. That's been pared down everybody now. Yeah.
Significantly. That's correct. There's just really a small handful. Right. And most of them really like me, having done it for a very long time. So it was very hard back then to find places. And I just really was looking, for places where I really kind of connected with personality wise. And once I started the gallery and when the internet came on and I taught myself how to code HTML, I made our first website. I started getting pretty good with all the search engine stuff. So we pretty much had the top gallery. If you typed in animation art and other various codes, people started coming to me. So because of the internet, people were emailing or calling saying, I have this for sale, that for sale. And one of the first things that I got, I'd only been in business a couple of years. This lady contacted me and she had this concept art from Snow White. And I knew it was amazing. Now with hindsight, 30 years later, I didn't realize how rare and amazing it was. Mm-hmm. And there was the queen with a pet puma, and the puma didn't make it to the final film, but this is, pretty serious concept art. I kept a few pieces for myself. The rest of the collection went to one of the biggest collectors in the world, and another collector found out about the collection after it had been sold and, was trying to get information out of me and stuff. It was kind of very interesting, which I don't talk about my clients, so I was keeping it all very private, but I knew it was good. I didn't realize that good that like the top collectors in the world were fighting over this. Right. That's something, that can kind of come with experience. But those are some of the best pieces I have in my collection. And I've never had anything quite like that come across me in 30 years since.
Yeah, I had a Mary Blair piece years ago that I bought for next to nothing from Dumbo, just from the Pink Elephant sequence.
Nice.
And I was dealing with somebody, and I wasn't particularly fond of it, and so I was just looking to get rid of it. And so I brought it to somebody in California, and who was a cell broker, and he looked at it, and he was just throwing me all this artwork. He's saying, "Oh, I'll trade you this and this and this and this for that." And I think he assumed that I knew what it was, and I didn't know what it was at the time. It wasn't until I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I realized, that's why. It was a Mary Blair piece. Obviously, the biggest collection of animation art is probably at the Walt Disney Animation Art area. We're talking about the facility that they have in Burbank, California.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they keep that. That's not really, as a collector, you kind of don't think of that art as existing because you can't access it and really see it.
Right.
I have visited there once and it was unbelievable. They were like, "Oh, what scene would you like to see things from?" And I said, "Oh, Dumbo, in the mother's trunk." And they just brought out this stack of drawings that gave me a heart attack. It was amazing. But that art is not really, it doesn't go into circulation.
No, it doesn't go into circulation, but it's the largest collection. It's amazing what they have
without
there.
Question.
I actually went into the morgue, the animation morgue, before I got into this area. I forgot the official name of it for the animation art collection where that's held in Burbank, California. But it's a special facility that they regulate the temperature to make sure that the art is in its best possible condition. But years ago, back in the early 80s, this stuff was down in the dungeon of the animation building. And there was one guy that was overseeing it. And I heard this somewhere. His name was Leroy. I think his name was Leroy. And he went in there and you could basically sign out a scene, the original scene from Dumbo or Lady and the Tramp or Snow White. And you you would sign out, put your name there, and then you would go and take it into your office upstairs, and you can have it for a week or 2 weeks, flipping through it or whatever you wanted to do, examining some drawings. And then they would come, are you done with that scene yet? And they would take it back and put it down into the dungeon, into the basement. Probably the worst area that you could have animation art.
Yeah.
But that's where they had all the cells and the drawings for many years. They all ended up in the basement of the animation building. Or the ink, it might be the ink and paint building, actually, where they might have kept it. So,
and also the animation research library might be what you're thinking of.
That might be it. Yeah. In the 40s, do you know? I know they marketed this stuff through galleries back in the late 30s. I don't think anybody else was really doing it, with the exception of Warner Brothers in stores. They marketed a few cells, and I guess it was too much for them, so they stopped doing it. But Disney kept marketing this art through Guthrie, Cavassier in San Francisco to all these different galleries around the country. And
there seems to be gaps. So you had Cavassier, then it seemed to be quiet. Then you had the Disneyland cell setups with that gold sticker on the back of the mat, where they trimmed and stuck them on a variety of backgrounds. Sometimes it doesn't even match from the same film, and the cells tend to be stuck on the Disneyland cell setups. Then that went kind of quiet. Then they started laminating them, a lot of the kind of Rescuers type era cells. And then you had some of those selling through the parks. And then you had the Disney stores used to sell animation. A lot of like Little Mermaids were premiered there. So these variety of like where they had a pocket where they would sell and then they'd go quiet. Then they'd try again and then they'd go quiet.
Right. And I guess there was, I think they were pretty popular back when they started marketing them at Disneyland, but I think somewhere along the way, somebody got the bright idea of putting them in galleries again, because I think the 70s, there was a resurgence in animation art. From what I understand, there was an auction here they had a televised auction here in Manhattan on WNET, which is Channel 13. And they would auction off material. People would just donate some stuff and they would auction off the material, and it would help support the station. And this was around 1972, 73. Disney put 2 setups up from the Aristocats, and they were just the same setups they would have at Disneyland that you could buy for $3 a piece.
Yeah.
And so what happened was they put a question mark on the value. What happened there went from $10 to $50 and then to $100. Eventually, they got up over $1,000. They shopped this in 1972.
Wow.
Televised auction. So you would just phone in your bid, and you would tell them that you'd give them your information or whatever, and then they would contact you if you won. And so these things went for well over $1,000 a piece. So I wonder if that had anything to do with them pulling them out of Disneyland, because they were selling them in Walt Disney World as well, those setups, for $3. And they had the gold sticker, and they were selling them in Florida. But all of a sudden, they stopped selling them at Disneyland, and they developed the Disney Art Program. And that's where they started taking these things and laminating them and putting a seal on them. And all of a sudden, they ended up in places like the Circle Galleries or at Disneyland. They were selling them at Disneyland. I know they were selling them in Florida, because I visited Disney World in 74, and they had a special gallery set up, and they had these Cinderella setups over there that they were selling for, I think, about $250 for a portfolio of 4, and they were limited editions. But they were also selling art from, and they were also selling art from 101 Dalmatians, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and from Robin Hood. Robin Hood came out in 73, so they had they had setups down there. So it was kind of interesting how that happened. When you sell original art, are there any like favorite characters, because you were saying that people come in for certain scenes, right? They're looking for something very specific, and you tell them, well, it really depends. Because we don't know if that scene still exists. We don't know if those drawings exist. We don't know if they were marketed or whatever. So you should really focus on, a character or a film or whatever. Are there any specific characters that are like, if you had a 1, 2, and 3, 1 as being the most popular, What are those three most popular characters that people are looking for that have been consistent over the years?
So I'll say what's most popular versus what sells the most because they're so hard to find. So I would say Cinderella and Cinderella in her ball gown. But we've only had a small handful over the years. They're so hard to find.
Right.
And so vintage-wise, Cinderella is probably the most popular one. Fantasia Mickey, meaning Mickey Mouse as the Sorcerer's Apprentice, is very, very popular. Newer Ariel has been popular, and she's really, her prices have jumped recently significantly.
Right.
So you kind of have the vintage kind of feel, and then the newer feel, and non-Disney Homer Simpson to me is the most popular. And we probably sold more original Simpson cells than any other gallery on the planet. I know The Simpsons. I love The Simpsons. I feel I can pick very strong images, and collectors really respond to that. The Grinch is also very, very popular, as well as Snoopy, like in the Peanuts. And then that bridges into like the original comic strips, which go for a fortune. And when we have those, we usually sell them off the first phone call. The original Peanut strips you cannot keep in inventory.
Interesting. Favorite film?
Vintage Cinderella and newer Little Mermaid.
I think most people would put those at the top of the list. What about Sleeping Beauty? I think the artwork in Sleeping Beauty is amazing. Some people, I had a conversation with somebody recently that they look at Snow White and they look at Sleeping Beauty and they see two totally different styles, and they don't like Sleeping Beauty and they prefer Snow White. Do you see it the same way?
As a film?
Artwork-wise.
That's interesting. I mean, there's certain films that I think can be kind of slow. It's interesting because I have young kids and I'm like, oh, we're going to watch Cinderella and you're going to love it. Or we're going to watch this. And compared to the cartoons now they're just very frenetic action wise. Yeah. The older films feel quite slow, and in some cases to the younger kids, I'm sad to say they feel like they're like, I'm bored, mommy. I'm like, oh, Cinderella, what do you mean you're bored? I'm like losing my mind. Art-wise, Sleeping Beauty art is phenomenal. It's not necessarily one of the more popular films. You find there's films that are popular because people like watching the film. And then there's other ones where the artwork is more popular because you had a Mary Blair working on it or an Ivan Earl or things like that. So there's different levels and interpretations of popularity, if you like.
Right. So what's the average dollar range? Like most collectors, I mean, look, there are collectors out there that basically they go out and they're looking for any piece of animation art, as long as it's under like $25, and so they'll just grab it. But I mean, people who really collect this stuff, some people kind of settle into like a price range, and I'm talking about like the average person out there. And when they're looking for this animation art, I guess the question is, do you find that do you sell more art that's over $1,000 or over $10,000, or do you find like the mid range is there a sweet spot over there for that?
Okay. So what happens is, there's kind of different sweet spots. We do a tremendous amount of business over the internet. And so under a certain price range, it doesn't actually make business sense for us to go through and spend all the time, an effort to process, say, a $25 piece since you use that. So in the gallery, sometimes we'll buy a big collection. We'll have things in the gallery that are $10, $25, $50, kind of starter pieces or less expensive pieces. And those do very well with people walking in, but we don't really sell them on the internet. I would say internet wise, there's a lot, you can get some really great vintage original pieces between like $400 and $2,000, from main films that you've heard of. Sometimes it needs to be a minor character versus, say, the major character. So in Snow White, you're not going to be getting a Snow White of her or the Witch or the Queen, but you might be able to get a dwarf. You get an adorable cell of some deers. You could get drawings in that range. So if you have your heart set on a certain film, it's very likely you could get things, or you could get a photostat. So you can get vintage pieces, but you might need to be flexible as to which character and what medium you end up purchasing.
Right. Now, when you I guess the drawings are, they're fragile, but not as fragile as the cells are, because when they're originally creating these things, they're basically just making them for the film. The art was only supposed to last as long as the shooting of the film, and then basically they really couldn't care after that. It was a byproduct of the animation process. But as with most animation art, and painted conventionally with gouache, with maybe some gum in it to maybe have it adhere to the cells better. Over time, some of these things start to lose their paint. Does that affect the value of the piece? Let's say it's losing some of the cell paint, but it's pretty much intact. You can see it, or maybe it's just kind of peeling away from the acetate. How do you approach that? And is there a way to restore it? Are there people that still restore this stuff? I know it's a loaded question, but you know where I'm getting at.
I think I know what you're getting at. So basically, the litmus test that I like to use is when you look at a piece that has some paint cracking or things like paint separation, is your eye, it's a personal choice. Is your eye going to the image of the piece, or is it focusing on that paint issue? If it focuses on the paint issue, it's my recommendation to get it restored. If it's not bothering you or you're just enjoying the image, my recommendation is to leave it as is. There are a few people that are doing the animation restoration. And if you have a choice between two pieces, it's preferable to get the one in the original paint and condition. But just sometimes these pieces it's interfering too much with the visual enjoyment. And then it's time to get it restored. There's some collectors that don't want restored pieces. They only want pieces with original art. And there's other collectors that are much more image sensitive and they don't mind it restored. They would rather have a restored piece that presents more visually perfect.
Gotcha. Are there
Did
still
I hit all the questions?
I think so. I mean,
okay.
you can always elaborate. I'm always willing to elaborate on stuff. I found over the years you used to have like quite a few people that actually did sell restoration, but it's kind of been pared down. There's not too many people out there anymore doing it. I mean, do you find that being a problem? Like if you need like a cell restored, or is it very expensive to have that done? Or
we have a person that we use that does very good work. That's we think she's reasonably priced. And that's the person that we use. Another consideration, of course, is how much is the piece worth and how much does it cost to restore it. So there's some pieces that you're just like, it's just not worth the cost to restore it. Just leave it as it is. And that's the situation that you have.
Right. I know there's people out there that they look at it and they see like the paint coming apart a little bit, and they rather just leave it like that because it's the original paint. It's the original image that was seen on film, and that's it. It's from the Disney studio or from the Warner Brothers studio. This is the authentic stuff. But then like you were saying, sometimes it just peels to the point where, yeah, it's still original, but it's not really original because it's beyond the point where it resembles anything like the original artwork that was on the screen. And by restoring it, you're bringing it back to what it was. It's still the actual piece of art that was shot under camera for that cartoon. You still have that, and you still have the ink lines on it, and or the Xerox lines on it. The only difference is that now you're matching the paint, and in some cases with the restoration being done, nobody would even know that it was restored. They would think that it's the original. But I know with all these older pieces, I want to say with Disney, probably pre-1983, probably pre-1985, because I think they started using the cell vinyl paint, which held onto the cells better, on Great Mouse Detective and stuff like that. I think all those older cells, they run the risk of having the cell paint come off and So it's good to really take those things and frame them correctly and put them up and try not to manhandle them too much. So
Right. And it's a good idea to keep them out of sunlight, not to put them under an air conditioner, those kinds of things. Don't put them in a bathroom where you have a shower running at times.
or keep them over a
Kinda keep them-
radiator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No radiators.
Not
Not
over the
their friend.
fireplace. Yeah. You don't want extreme heat.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you want to store these things. As with the drawings too, the drawings you want to keep in a nice temperature controlled environment. Not too much heat, not too much cold, not too much humidity, not too dry either. Not
too near the sun.
Right.
Exactly.
What are your recommendations, like for anybody that's going out now because, I keep hearing this over and over again, like, the animation art, it's, there were a lot of pieces out and I'm not able to find the pieces as readily as I used to be able to find them. I mean, that's just an advent of the computer technology coming in. All these shows are being computer painted now. There are no cells anymore. But, I think it's like the old, they talk about land, they're not making it anymore. So, it's kind of a similar situation. It's like there were certain number of cells that were made available. Maybe somebody has them in their garage or whatever, from working at a studio, and they may have a stack of stuff sitting somewhere. But as these things are valued and they're put up on people's walls or they're put in, in collections, wherever they are, there's fewer and fewer that we're seeing because I think there's more and more people that are actually getting into the animation art. Do you agree with that or?
Okay, so we have a multi-layered question here. So
I know
what we're looking at is one basic economic supply and demand, right? So one of the things you touched on is there's no more supply. For example, Simpsons stopped doing cells. A number of years ago. Gosh, I'm getting old. I'm not sure how many, but I feel it's now like a couple decades ago almost. You have the newer shows, no cells. So you have that kind of situation. And then particularly with the internet, a couple of things happened. One, supply increased to a certain degree in that people, as an example, as I said before, found me. They had these things in their attic, in their basement, in their wherever, not realizing these things had any value. They, for whatever reason, trip across my gallery and they're like, oh my goodness, these have value. And it's exciting when you find that. You're like, oh my God, I just discovered. It's like discovering a new, we'll use your land example. I discovered a new country. All of a sudden, this art that no one knew was available to collectors. So you have that. But on the flip side, the demand went up tremendously, like you also touched on, because all these people didn't realize animation was a thing. I still run into people now who didn't realize they could collect animation. And I'm surprised. I was like, gosh, with the internet and all these other things, but there are definitely people I run into and they're like, I had no idea I could collect. I love The Simpsons. I knew I could collect this. I love Disney. I had no idea because Disney World doesn't sell the original cells anymore. They sell reproduction pieces.
Right.
I'll pivot for a second if that's okay.
Yeah.
There's
Please
also
do.
a lot of confusion in the market where a lot of collectors did not understand the difference between a series cell, which is a reproduced piece, often in the thousands. That's where you can get your perfect scene. It's not an original piece of art. Then they had the hand-painted limited editions, usually editions of around 500. Again, beautiful scene, hand-painted, but confusion. A lot of people think they have an original cell when they don't. And those could often go like to $5,000. So the price point in some cases is actually higher than an original piece from the film, but that's what people were exposed to at the Disney stores, at the Warner Brothers stores and things like that. So for a while there was a lot of confusion, which I have worked very hard to try and educate. The most important thing to me for my collectors is that they're good on what they're buying. They understand what they're buying. It fits their goals. So we'd like to ask new collectors questions. What are you looking for? What budget works for you? Let's find a piece that fits what you want. And we work very hard to match it like that. Yep.
Talking about Ceracells, limited edition cells, Ceracells are basically prints on celluloid that simulate the look of an animation cell, but they're not. They're not original. And they do say Ceracell on them. They don't say an original. They will say, it might say Walt Disney Company Ceracell. And they're normally in editions of they could be anywhere from 500 to 5,000 or 10,000.
That's correct.
Okay.
I like to think of them as posters on plastic is how we kind of refer to them.
Right, but they do simulate the effect of a cell.
That's
an animation cell. Okay.
Visually, they look very similar.
Yes. Now, a limited edition cell is normally they'll put a lithograph background behind it. I mean, they've done that with the Ceracells, but they are basically, there's a couple of different ways they could do it. They take the line image and it's put on through the same process of a serograph, correct? Like some of the Chuck Jones pieces that are out there. I think the line is a serograph on there. And then they paint it conventionally. They use paint on the back of it. And also simulating the effect of a real animation cell. But that's but it's a limited edition. It's a limited edition of one of 300 or one of 500 or whatever, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then you have the full-blown stuff where you have an image, let's say from Sleeping Beauty, where it's a limited edition cell, where they're actually hand inking. They're doing all the processes that they would do for an animation cell with the hand inking, the colored hand inking, and then the painting on the back. So it is just like they painted a cell for the movie, but it is a limited edition. It's the same image, 1 out of 500 normally.
Correct.
Just want to clarify that for the audience, because I have seen people they'll say, "Oh, I have a cell of Woody Woodpecker," and it's on a copy background, and they're saying it's a Ceracell, but it's really an original cell and has Walter Lance's autograph on the cell, and then the background is the authentic background from the cartoon, and so clearly people don't get it right.
Yeah. There's a lot of confusion. And to add to the confusion, for a while they were doing something called 1 of 1, where the animation drawing was the original drawing, and then the studio was recreating the cell from that drawing. So it matched, but the cell was not original, but the drawing was. Just to make things fun and interesting.
Right. And in those, I think Chuck Jones was doing those, wasn't he? At one time?
Chuck Jones is doing that. Disney did it for a little while as well.
Right. So you get a one of one. So you get the original drawing, but you get one limited edition celluloid that nobody else will have.
Right. So it's like a limited edition of one.
Limited edition of one. So
pretty limited.
Well, as long as you got the drawing, I guess that's not too bad, right? I don't know. How do they sell well?
No. No. Well, there's different levels of collectors. So there's collectors that are new and aren't educated in all the different levels of everything. So a lot of newer collectors are like, oh, that's very appealing. I would say the collectors that are very, very knowledgeable, the one of ones, are not appealing to them. So you have different collectors at different levels with different collecting goals.
Okay.
And so it's about matching that. We sell almost all original art. So the collectors that we have are very advanced in their knowledge, collecting wise. So that's, more what I'm speaking to.
Right. So you're talking to the people who actually know what they're looking at, and they're informed, and I get that.
Right. And if they're not, if they want to, which most of them do, we take the time to inform them to make sure. We want people collecting for life. We don't want someone coming in, not knowing what they're buying, having a bad experience and never collecting. We want people to come in, be happy with what they buy from us, recommend us to other people. And that's the culture that we have at my gallery. That's how I want to be treated as a collector. And that's how I want to treat our collectors.
Do you, when you get collectors, you develop a relationship with these people, And then they tell you, this is what I'm looking for. Do you have like, I guess when you develop a relationship with a gallery owner, they start looking out for certain items for that collector, right?
That's correct.
It's
So we have
beneficial to
wish
you and to the
lists.
collector. Yeah.
Right. So, for example, recently we have a collector that buys a lot from us and said, oh, I really, really want a good grumpy. We got a good grumpy in. Yay. I mean, we were looking for a year or two for this collector. Grumpy comes in, show it to the client, sells right away, never hits the website, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of sourcing and sales that happen right away, because the more someone communicates with us, the more we can be on the lookout for them. And you get it in and it goes right to the person that communicated with you.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Are there any recommendations that you can make for somebody wanting to get into this? So let's say they don't know anything about it, but they really, they want to buy one piece of art. Maybe they don't want to buy a whole collection, but they want one piece of art that represents Lady and the Tramp. What would you recommend, the type of art or the character? Let's say they have, a couple of $1,000s that they can spend. Maybe they have a little bit more than that, but they just want that one piece of art to be on the wall, and they can go up to it and say, yeah, that's the definitive sell and background from this film.
So I'll start with the definitive scene is obviously the Bella Notte or the spaghetti scene. The spaghetti scenes, I've seen them. I've had them from time to time. They're going very strong. So the main scenes like that, the Cindy in the dress, Snow White, Witch and the Apple, those kind of things can be 10, 20, so-and-so thousand. So a little higher than the scenario you're giving to me. So if someone has a couple thousand, that's a nice budget for animation. I would recommend that they get an original piece, whether it be a drawing, storyboard, original cell, that the original with the original backgrounds called master setups or production setups or keymaster setups will be higher than that range. But I'm recommending an original piece of art and something that they enjoy. And it doesn't have to fit anyone else's definition of what they enjoy. I have some things in my collection that, wouldn't be deemed. I heard when I first started collecting, you should go for eyes open and full figure and all these things. I have pieces where Snow White's singing, her eyes are closed. It's wonderful. It's not eyes open. I think it's a fabulous piece. It doesn't fit certain people's definitions. It speaks to me. I have things where various characters are blushing or there's lightning effects, because I find that really interesting and a wonderful example of the animation process. So the most important thing is that the piece brings you joy. This is going to be on your wall. You're spending a certain amount of money on it. And so it's really what speaks to you. Look at a piece. Maybe it reminds you of a fun day out with your kids. Maybe it reminds you of some place you went on your anniversary. Whatever your connection is, that's what I recommend. And then to have it, framed professionally and framed in a way that enhances the piece. And then you get to enjoy it. There's some people that come to us and say, what should I invest in? I'm really hesitant to ever recommend that. You buy a car, right? That's a lot of money. You don't expect your car to go up. You don't expect your TV to go up. You don't expect your fridge to go up. To me, if the art goes up in value, that's wonderful. But I think the most important thing is to buy something that brings you joy, because that really is what collecting is about. That excitement of finding the piece, owning the piece, and enjoying the piece and sharing it with your friends and family. And one of the things I think is so interesting and exciting about collecting animation art is that there's a lot of, say, fine artists. Someone walks in your home, they have no idea who that artist is in most cases. Animation, anybody from probably any country, not even necessarily speaking the same language you speak, people know who Mickey Mouse is. People know who Homer Simpson is. People know who Snow White is. Kids, grown-ups. I mean, it's an amazing art medium that pretty much everybody in the world knows. And I think that's pretty interesting and exciting.
It is exciting. I've always thought it was exciting to have a cell from a film that I've enjoyed for years. It from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, where basically it's a beloved film from, people have seen it around the world. And you have that one frame of film, that one frame from it that nobody can ever take away from you. It's basically nobody else will have that exact moment in that film. And that's why I think that's so wonderful. one of the great things about animation art collecting.
I agree. I mean, it's a piece of history.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. All these pieces. And I love it. I'm so happy that I got introduced to it. I'm so happy that this can be my job. I'm incredibly lucky.
Do you have your own collection of animation art, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Is there any one piece in your collection that you think like this is the ultimate?
Is there one piece that you would say, are you asking me like what's my favorite piece?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the most valuable piece. It could just be your most, I'll tell you, I have a cell of Chip and it's not even on a production background. It's just, but he's joyous. He has his arms up in the air. He's kind of hopping and he's on top of it's actually a background that was taken out of, I think, the Art of Animation book, which somebody either took a picture of and enlarged and put a cell of Chip on it. But it's my favorite because it's actually pretty joyous. It's a joyous image. And so happy. And I like it a lot. There are other things that I have that I really like, but that's the one where basically I can look at it. It makes me smile.
I would say the piece to me that's the most impactful is one of my first ones. At the time, it was my most expensive one. It's one of Lady and the Tramp, which I enjoy the film. It's not my favorite film. It's Lady flipping her air at Tramp. He's upset her and she's like, and there you see the air flipping and you can feel, the energy off the piece. And I remember buying the piece was very exciting, trying to, get it and bring it in and being the most expensive piece I had. So I have a lot of emotions tied up in that one piece. Right. But I would tell you if you had thousands of people view my collection, I doubt anybody else would say, oh, that's, the most important or impactful piece. No one else would pick that piece but me.
But that's the important thing with animation art collecting is you buy the piece that triggers an emotion in you. Debbie, what's your website? If people want to check this out, they want to check out the artwork on your website. Got some really interesting pieces on there right now. What's your website address? You have two, right?
The website is wwagallery.com. Some people accidentally put 3 W's. It's just the 2, wwagallery.com. And we tend to have a couple thousand pieces available for purchase at any one time.
So basically you have Warner Brothers, you have Hanna-Barbera, you got Walter Lantz, and plenty of Disney on there, as well as Simpsons.
Yep. Peanuts, Simpsons, a smattering. Mostly Disney, because they have, such a depth for Disney, and we have so many collectors that like Disney. But there's a handful of other things for sure. Okay,
very good. Put a little post about your gallery and about this podcast so people can go right to it. And you can go right there from our link to Debbie's website. Debbie, thank you for coming on. I'd like to have you on again in the future.
Thank you so much. It was absolutely my pleasure, and it would be my pleasure to do it anytime again that you would like.
Okay, very good.
Do you have any questions or comments about the podcast? Please email Brian at cartoonerific.com. Your email may be featured in one of our future shows.
Hey, well, thank you, Debbie Weiss, for being our special guest today. Next week, Mr. Willie Ito. He is a Warner Brothers and Hanna-Barbera animation artist. He's a legend in the business, and he will be joining us for the first of a 2-part interview, so stay tuned for that. If you're liking what you're hearing, please subscribe. Visit one of the services that carry us, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, so many others. So please check us out and tell a friend. If you really like what you hear, tell a friend. Please tell a friend. I'm begging you, please tell a friend. Anyway, thank you for listening. I really enjoy doing these podcasts. I hope you're enjoying them. And we'll see you again next week. So I want you to have a great day. Have a terrific week. And thanks for tuning in.
This has been a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
The Cartoonerific podcast is copyright 2024 by Cartoonerific Studios Incorporated. All rights reserved.